Good afternoon, and welcome to the Press Club. And a reminder that any questions should come from members of the media and members of the Press Club, and please make them questions, not comments. And our guest is Gene Mills. In 1998, he was the founder of the Louisiana Family Forum, which has become one of the major political players in our state. Next year will be 25 years for the Family Forum. Gene Mills, father of 8 and influencer of many more than that in the state legislature, is here to talk about a few different matters, but of course, over the course of the last 50 years, 49 years, organizations like the Family Forum have made it their principal goal to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that has happened, and there is a new world post-Roe. So we will talk with him about that, and any questions are invited after he makes his remarks. And Reverend Mills, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about some very significant developments that have taken place in Louisiana and around the country. This has been a busy season for us. Can y'all hear me? Is this amplified, or is this just for TV purposes?
I mean, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. That's what I want to make sure. The Family Forum started in 1997, as Jim mentioned, with the primary goal in mind of providing a voice for traditional families throughout the state of Louisiana and in the arena where ideas are made. For those of you who are not familiar with the Forum or our affiliations around the country, we're one of 37 other state family policy councils who communicate and cooperate on issues important. Obviously, we operate in different states. Some states are red, some states are blue, some are purple. But our goal is to take a message that extends beyond the traditional limits and limitations and talks about issues that traditional families are interested in. We're a nonprofit 501c3 engaged in a wide range of public policy issues for the purposes of strengthening the intact functional family, for the health and well-being of each individual member in the family, and the safety of Louisiana families. Our mission is to persuasively present timeless truths in the centers of influence on issues affecting family through research, communication, and networking. And that's the one thing that we've probably done exceptionally well, because we believe relationships are not a quick thing. Where I'm from, Opelousas, Louisiana, a quick relationship is called an affair. And that's not, we're in the business of creating affairs. We communicate and cooperate with individuals across the state, often they're decision makers. The two primary categories include pastors through local churches and policymakers because they're decision makers. Those two influencers often don't communicate on issues that are being discussed unless some intentionality or some persuasive ability is created to link the two categories, and we try to do that. Our vision is to help to build a Louisiana where God is honored, and we're not embarrassed or ashamed, nor do we hide from that. We believe that behind every piece of public policy, somebody's morality is embedded in it. It's just not usually a traditional faith-based morality until and unless somebody with persuasive ability can present that and win over a majority of the votes. And we think that in the arena where ideas are made, your voice and mine ought to equally be heard. So our vision is to help build a Louisiana where God is honored, life is respected, families flourish, and liberty reigns. In 2022, the legislative session was a big win for LFF. Our primary focus is mission engagement in the legislative process, and we saw from our perspective 27 wins. 6 of those were kind of taken away because the governor decided to veto them. But our big 3 sailed through the Capitol, saving or preserving women's sports, preventing biological males from competing against biological females. Obviously, that drew a veto last year, a near veto override. That threat loomed over the entire legislative body, but the governor decided to let it go into law without his signature. That was one of our primary issues. The second consisted of the pro-life bills that brought both criminal and civil penalties and in line with regard to our trigger law if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned. And of course, we know that it was. A third big win dealt with the so-called adult content, what we would call smut. You know, oftentimes this is the most dangerous playground for kids in America today. And they told us a few years back, oh no, you know, casinos can do age verification. So we said, we're going to challenge you to see if that's true. We said, if you can do it for casinos and parishes that said no thank you, then you can do it on websites and on online devices where parents say no thank you. Or the provider of that material would have to go through a legitimate age verification process. And we said that we thought that was a good idea. And those who didn't, this bill, Lori Schlegel's bill, created a cause of action for the parents who wanted to litigate against them. At the conclusion of the legislative session, we always compile our legislative scorecard. Trinity, can you bring one of those to me? I'm sorry, I forgot to bring that. This scorecard is kind of it's an effort, and you hang on to the others, just give me one. How many of y'all appreciate my lovely assistant, Trinity Wicker? That's Tyra and Mike Wicker's daughter, and she's been extraordinary, wrapping up her studies at LSU. This scorecard is designed to create conversation and communication. It's not designed to be a weapon. It's designed to be an invitation to talk about the things that are important to traditional families throughout Louisiana and many of the churches that we represent. During the session, we published clear statements on bills of interest to the faith community. We provide floor notes, policy papers regarding our position on these and other matters. The scorecard, which is available here, I brought copies for you, and on our website, is designed to capture the viewpoint discrepancies or differences in the legislative body. And obviously, depending upon the leadership, you've had far fewer of those bills that are debated or to come to a vote without a clear majority of one party or the other. We try not to score the 97 or 100 to nothing votes because it doesn't really tell you the full story. This year it was very difficult to find the divisions that existed on the floor because often some of those bills died in committee or died before they even got to the committee process. We believe that the viewpoint differences in the chamber and of bills of interest to the faith community ought to be discussed after the session. You know, it was an old political consultant who once told me, Dan Ritchie, in creation, he advised me in the creation of this scorecard almost 20 years ago. He said, you know, when I was a legislator, the greatest fear of a lawmaker is that the people back home would find out how we're voting. This instrument is designed to help tell that story or to provide an opportunity to explain whether it represented the people back home's values or not. During the session, this scorecard is available here, like I said earlier, and it's our hope that voters back home will use it to help have those productive conversations with their lawmakers. Ultimately, it's engaged citizens and pastors who use these tools and other LFF communications to assist lawmakers in casting votes that are consistent with their Louisiana values, pro-life and pro-family values. I believe Louisiana is an extraordinary place to be from. I saw a report last week, we published it on social media, that said 6 of the 10 happiest places in America to live are right here in Louisiana. Now, Mark, you wouldn't always get that listening to some of the things that y'all write about in your paper. But it's important in Louisiana that the things we value, and I think they're pretty simple, things that we try to represent are family, faith, and freedom. And in Louisiana, we still represent all of those. Still, 60% of Louisiana lives within 60 miles of where they were born. I'm one of those. I pray that my children have that opportunity. We said goodbye to one of them earlier this month when they moved to Austin in chance or in pursuit of a career opportunity that could feed a growing family, much to our unhappiness or disappointment. Not for them, but for the disconnectedness. We think in order for families to thrive, they need to be connected to their extended family. It often provides the necessary safety net and foundation for their success going forward. Because Louisiana residents still value faith, family, and freedom. Distant fourth might be football, at least once upon a time it was. I think it probably still is. Those convictions, when clearly enumerated, provide a guide for voters looking for the candidate who best represents their values. Our LFF Gala, which celebrates some of the issues, and look, I'll be the first to tell you this isn't a perfect instrument. It's just a snapshot. It's not even the most important issues. We try to cover the gamut of issues. I could have just listed all the life issues. I could have just listed the ones that died elsewhere.
Thank you, Brad.
But in order to create a snapshot, I needed to capture the ones that included some of the divisions, some of the outliers, and some of the words that were spoken in defense or against the particular bill. We'll celebrate the ones who did well on this card at our 2020 LFF Gala, scheduled to take place on September 20th at Healing Place Church. Isn't that great? We're inviting all the lawmakers to the church. It's a good place to go, and it's a place that we think is an appropriate place to discuss the matters that have a moral basis that are important to families throughout Louisiana. 6 senators and 20 representatives earned an outstanding family advocate by scoring 100%. 61 legislators will be honored with the Family Advocate Award, and then there'll be another 7 or 8 that'll be given a Life and Liberty Award for authoring and marshaling the process and signing into law significant bills. This year we have the privilege of hosting the team that argued the Dobbs case before the Supreme Court. Lynn Fitch, the Mississippi Attorney General, and her right-hand attorney and lead counsel, Solicitor General Scott Stewart, will be at our gala to talk about the significant historical moment. I was with them in D.C. and in Virginia, right before the case was argued, right after it was argued. We actually knelt and prayed as the Supreme Court, top legal brass from around the country of a pro-life venue and nature, knelt and prayed as the court went into private session to decide 3 days after the oral arguments where they were going and what their initial pressures were. Scott is an incredible young man. Lynn has got an exciting story to tell, and we look forward to being able to celebrate with the lawmakers in Louisiana and celebrating this great victory. In a pros roll, Louisiana, and I'll be the first to admit, Jim, you were correct. I've worked my entire adult life for this day. I really have, 39 years. 39 years since I heard the cry of the unborn. And it followed me to bed at night. It followed me on vacation. It followed me to work. It followed me to church. There was no place that I could go where that cry did not escape me. And it motivated and purposed what I felt like God had instructed me to do. And that included to go to the place where decisions are made in the arena of ideas, legislatively and legally, and make a case that every single human life has dignity and ought to be respected, from the early moments of conception until natural death. And that's what we attempted to do on Friday, June 24th of 2022. U.S. Supreme Court declared the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood versus Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is now returned to the people and to their representatives. That doesn't mean our work's done. It simply means some states have said very clearly, Louisiana is one of those states. We passed our trigger law in 2006. It was Democratic Senator Ben Nevers, one of the governor's closest friends in earlier sessions and a tenure of his career, who said once SCOTUS overturns Roe, that abortion would become illegal in the state of Louisiana, with financial penalties and prisons for those who commit the crime of illegal abortions. The recent changes to our trigger law deal with what abortion is and what it is not, and what's considered illegal. On June 24th, the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals sent 3 abortion clinics a cease and desist performing abortions letter. However, the industry, not unexpectedly, has challenged Louisiana's eviction notice. And by the way, I described this from a family that once owned a small apartment complex in LSU. We often had to deal with bad tenants or those who weren't faithful to the terms of the contract. And basically, now that the Supreme Court has said, not only is there no longer a right to abortion, it never existed. We don't find it anywhere in the Constitution. This earlier court, the 73 court, machinated that decision. I was shocked to hear that. I had hoped that this court would go further. and say we do find in the 9th, 10th, and 14th Amendment a respect for life ethic for every unborn child. They didn't go that far. They simply said we're going to return it to the people. It's a difficult question, and difficult questions are returned to the people to decide. But we got work to do, and we plan on being a part of that process. Since then, it's been back and forth on the bans and injunctions, and the latest ruling, I think, came last Monday, and once again, the clinic is shut down. My perspective is abortionists will appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, and they have, asking for an injunction to be reinstated. To date, I don't know of any new developments on that. But make no mistake, Louisiana has provided the eviction notice to the doctors who provide that service in Louisiana. The only question that remains, and this is even true if they got to go back into session to clear up something that may be unclear, which I don't believe it is. The only question that remains is, what is the effective date of the eviction notice in order? As of Monday, they were told cease and desist again. That may stand all the way through. Going forward, we recognize that doesn't mean our work is done. Our job is to restore respect life ethic throughout our state and country. That's why we co-published this with some of our other colleagues around the country, Life After Roe. We've got copies of this available if you would like those. They deal with the issues that we know going forward we still got to be a part of. Issues like law and public policy with the respect life ethic, care for women and children who are often the victims of the abortionist industry, and the persuasion that that's your only option or that's your only route or it's the only place of success you can find. We think those are very bad messages and they're not at all honest. Elections and candidates and their position on the life issues, and we're interested in that. Education, both public and within the churches, in dealing with the respect life ethic and the beauty of all human development. And then direct action for those who are involved in 40 Days for Life, crisis counseling centers, medical facilities, and being able to provide those services and go beyond what we've done in the past. Jim, I believe you asked me, and how much time do I have for my 20 minutes?
You have about 5 minutes.
On the midterm elections, I've been asked to speak to some of that. We don't get too terribly deep in the election process. We haven't had to. I don't lie lawmakers. I don't wine and dine them. I communicate and cooperate with them. We believe that this is best accomplished through relationships, and that's one thing the church does well. It learns how to walk in relationship with other covenant people. Most of us, regardless of where we're from, north, south, east, or west Louisiana, what label we wear, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, share many of the same basic core values that our grandparents instilled into us. Some of us can explain more lucidly with constitutional law or statute and citing it where its originations are. Others can describe philosophically or religiously where the moral precepts, foundations, and principles are derived from. But almost all of us agree collectively on some of the simple things that have been debated under those broad categories of faith, family, and freedom. Now, there's disputes about how do you accomplish this, and I think those are honest conversations. And where a civil dialogue can occur and an honest conversation can be had, best ideas can be put on the table rather than demagogued. What I've seen in the last 10 or 12 years of the legislative process, particularly at a federal level, is that it's gotten coarser. It's coarsening. And it's much more difficult. The middle ground of communication, not necessarily being in the middle of the road, but the willingness to have a dialogue is where we have failed to keep the lines of communication open and productive. And we hope to change that. On the midterm elections, if I were a bet man, I'd bet on the white horse in the last race. Somebody would get that later. I'd also bet on Kennedy with a 60% plus favorable, and the rest above 50% in their pursuit of this. Now, I do understand that my buddy Clay Higgins has some legitimate challenge, and there's a well-funded associate DA who's been engaged in that election. Obviously, we're going to be interested in where your positions are on the faith, family, and life issues that we represent. If Kennedy does come in above 50 and the rest above 50%, above 60, Scalise becomes majority leader, and that's likely. If McCarthy becomes speaker and Michael Johnson continues to shine. Supermajorities are possible in the Louisiana legislature. It came close before. There's been a fractured relationships amongst many of those so-called conservatives, in part because of the necessity to put a team together and a willingness to play on those given teams and with other team members. Supermajorities are still possible, though, on life, liberty, and limited government, and I think they're likely in the near future. Our focus in the fall elections will be to identify candidates who strongly embrace life, liberty, and limited government, and who reject the extra constitutional policies of late, governance by emergency powers, executive order, bureaucratic rule, or simple coercion and weaponizing the police power of the state or its taxing authority. We will publish a voter's guide to assist Louisiana in evaluating their candidates and where they stand on Louisiana values. That'll be a zip code driven guide, free of charge, for whomever is running at a state or federal level. We don't really go much deeper than that because we don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to. Finally, in a matter of days, I'll be floating a paid family leave concept. We think in a post-Roe America and a post-Roe Louisiana, we got to talk seriously about, well, how then do you facilitate these young families or young mothers in accomplishing those goals you've enumerated? We've been engaged in paid family leave a number of years around the state, and we believe we are looking for conservative solutions to a difficult dilemma that basically needs to be budget neutral, no increase in taxes, and no mandates on businesses or taxpayers. It becomes voluntary. And Senator Bill Cassidy floated an idea a few years ago. Cassidy's idea dealt with a future tax credit and drawing it down in an accelerated manner against the future. That was something we supported. Other ideas have been floated. Obviously, there's some that go much further than that, but we still believe that that dialogue needs to be had. That's what we've been up to. On a personal note, with 8 kids, there's always a moving target. I said I was going to mention this. 2 of my sons became engaged in the last 2 weeks, one in the last 24 hours, surprising his young intern of Gary Graves' future fiance, in the little booth where Jack Kennedy proposed to Jacqueline Kennedy. They call it the proposal booth. And she dreamed of Camelot and one day going there, and well, to her surprise and his much well-planned proposal, he showed up, he got his ring, special order on Wednesday night, got his ticket later that night, and on Thursday was on his way to meet her and her family who were preparing to move her back to Baton Rouge. They excused themselves to go find a restroom as he ushered himself in and surprised her deeply, and to our delight, the lady said yes. So we have another child due, another grandchild due in a matter of about a month. I got 4 reconstructing houses, 1 coming back from Special Forces where he's doing his emergency field medicine training. One of the guys in his unit came down with COVID, so they all had to go into the timeout box. So there's a lot happening in the Mills household. And I'm delighted to be with you today. If I can answer any questions, I'll try to.
Reverend Mills, with laws allowing abortion in many other states, not Louisiana and most of the South, what is the next move? You say the job's not complete. Does that mean you will be advocating a federal ban, maybe going through Congress to have laws passed that would apply to all 50 states?
So the question is, with the statement that I made that our job is not complete, I think I mean this correct, correct me if I'm wrong. What is our plan going forward? Is it a federal ban? Is it some other action? I'll be the first to tell you, I would love to see a respect life ethic that flows all the way through America. I think God has given us extra time because some states have gone on record that we do respect life. Now we have to deliver on that. And that's been my message to the churches. My work in Louisiana probably will double or quadruple, at least with regard to our crisis counseling centers, our medical facilities. Their workload is about to go way up. If we do our job well, it should conclude with a favorable result. And we're going to do our level best to make the welcome sign known to Louisiana with regard to those care pregnancy centers and the services they provide, the ability to reach them in the pew and through the local church. We're going to have to learn to do what we did once upon a time, and that is families work together in ministering to the needs of the families that are nearest, kind of like we do in a storm.
So is that a yes as far as advocating a bill that would apply to all 50 states?
I think there's going to be a season where it took 50 years for us to get to this place. It took 50 years for this court and a pro-life generation of young people to wake up to the reality. And about 10 years ago, it wasn't about science anymore. It was about public education and understanding. And it was about, hey, look, we're not taking a right away. The court has said it never existed. I think through time, there may be a point in time in which we do get to that. I have a lot of work to do in Louisiana. The 7,000 to 10,000 women that we know sought an abortion last year will need assistance this year, or likely equally enough. And I don't know that we're ready for that. And I think our goal is to get ready. Now, we've been preparing for this moment, and it's finally arrived. The question is, can we do it effectively? So yes, Jim, I think long-term, absolutely. I think the law is a teacher. And for years, we always thought that if it's legal, it must be moral. And I think there's a season where we got to allow that settle in. There are a lot of people that are under deep confusion about what we once said was okay, what we now say is not, and what does that mean going forward? And there are different people who sit in different seats. Those who've made that decision, those who've made it for others, and those who are about to make it going forward. And how do we deal with that? So yeah, I believe it includes all of those things. Yes, ma'am.
There have been a lot of comments since the Dobbs decision. There have been a lot of comments publicly from doctors about some of the concerns that they have about provisions of the rewritten anti-abortion law that just passed. And I was just wondering, I know y'all were involved in some of the language that was developed. Can you talk about how y'all worked on that language with the legislators, and if doctors were involved or consulted in any way in that conversation?
Yeah, when you talk about doctors, you're talking about a pretty large group.
Right.
Talking about abortionists, you're not really talking about, from our vantage point, those who have taken, say, a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So, yeah, you can get yays and nays from all over the map, but of course, all the resident experts, all the way up the ladder and all the way to a federal level, including our allies at Alliance Defending Freedom and the National Right to Life and their physicians' assistants have been involved in the decisions and the language that we've crafted. Does that mean that language is perfect? No, I don't think you ever create something that's perfect on this side of eternity. And law is a blunt instrument as well. Could it have been done better? Maybe it needs to be. I don't suspect that's the case. I think the argument is vague and unclear. And I think on that argument, it's not going to stand. I think our eviction notice is going into effect. What does it mean going forward for physicians? And I'm sorry, I failed to ask your
I'm just
question.
making sure. So you are saying that there were some doctors who were involved in the development of that
all the way
language?
through for all 40 years that I've been involved. We've never not consulted physicians.
Are you anticipating that any of them will speak publicly about the language? Because I feel like everything we've heard from doctors seems to be on one perspective.
I think the real question is, what does the court say? You know, I mean, there may be some who are curious about what a doctor may say, but that's really up to any individual doctor. I can't answer for them. Laney, you have a question?
I think Mark did.
Mark?
I have another question, but let me follow up on what Melinda's talking about. The law is dealing with surgical procedures, some of which are actually used for miscarriages, which are legal under the trigger. So how are we going to enforce the physician who is doing it for miscarriage, but is doing a procedure that is illegal for abortion?
I think that's the question is, the law deals with certain perspectives or procedures that are illegal under the law, but are prescribed or practiced routinely. Is that correct? The crime of abortion is defined as the doctor in Louisiana intentionally taking the life of a perfectly healthy child from a perfectly healthy mother. Every female senator and a majority of the female House members voted in support of Act 545. The law tells us what abortion is and is not. Treatment for ectopic pregnancy is not prohibited. Handling a miscarriage is not prohibited. Taking action necessary to prevent a death or substantial risk to the death of the pregnant mom is not prohibited. In other words, physicians can still make reasonable medical discernment and efforts in good faith and judgment to save a woman's life, and in serious medical emergencies, make the decision that this is a threat to her life.
But there needs to be another physician that would also agree that this is one of those conditions.
We do that in any end-of-life matter. It's generally two physicians, they call it. If you're going to become a donor, an organ donor, you have to have two physicians that declare the death. I don't think that second opinion is usually a good idea. The myth that contraception is prohibited in 545, or that it prohibits a woman's ability to access contraception or emergency contraception, is blatantly untrue. That's just not. What we need is a little bit of time for the law to be understood, and then discussed, and then taught within the state of Louisiana.
But if I'm a physician out of the Tensall Parish, where do I find that second opinion in an emergency situation?
You know, that's up to a physician in Tensall Parish. I wonder what the hospital nature is there. A physician is going to be operating out of some center. So I can't answer that hypothetical. I can't tell you that burden is going to exist upon a medical facility to find a physician in order to do that. And it doesn't seem to be unreasonable burdensome so far to this legislature. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry.
I had my real question. A number of legislators have approached me, and they've said that while they are anti-abortion legislators, they fear for, they would support incest and rape exceptions, but fear that the Family Forum, the Catholic Church, would ban them as abortion promoters, I guess, but for those two exceptions. I mean, can you address that?
Yeah.
And can you address why no incest? Why not?
I think the question is, with rape and incest exceptions, some lawmakers feel as though while they may be, quote, pro-life, they feel like they would be penalized if they took possession that dealt with exceptions of rape and incest or other issues. Look, one of those is a moral question. When does life begin? The other is a political consideration. What is it going to cost me to take one of these positions going forward? If life begins at conception, it should be of no surprise to you or to Louisiana, which many Louisianians believe, that each life should be preserved without regard to how it was conceived. We don't believe, from my vantage point, that that child should be a victim of another bad decision. We do believe the rapist should be penalized to the highest extent of the law. Now, on the political consideration, man, this is politics. That same political consultant, Dan Ritchie, once told me, man, if you can't take a joke in politics, you ought not be in politics. And so you've got to be in a place, if you're standing for the Louisiana people, and you're going to represent an issue, to represent it clearly. That question came up, that vote, I believe, was offered by Gerald Boudreaux, and it was shot down immediately on the Senate floor. I may be mistaken about the author of the bill and the amendment that dealt with the exception. But I do believe that it's important. I think it's tragic for somebody who's been through a rape. I think it's tragic when you live in a highly sexualized world that constantly, never-endingly, never ceasingly puts something before children in every venue, from entertainment to education. We brought sexual politics into every arena. Then we're shocked and scandalized when somebody is a victim of what we celebrate. I don't understand it either. I wish it was a different world. Sin complicates things. And so we live in a very complicated society. But I do think what brings clarity are certain principles that are guiding principles in life. And they can help us to make decisions going forward. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What were your-
Go ahead.
What were your excuse me? What were your thoughts on the recent election results in Kansas pertaining to the abortion matter, and what do you believe caused the people to voice the sentiments they did?
I think Kansas is a weird place. That's where Bob Dole comes from. It's just different. John Cuvillon just put out a study, said it's still a red state. Don't think it's any longer red. Kansas has got a blue governor, and that often can steer the decisions. I think our blue governor steered some decisions. I think some people say, well, you say, how did they get a blue governor? Same way we did. He promised he was pro-life and pro-gun. Now, some people feel like that he might not have fulfilled the rest of that promise. I'm not here to talk about that, but I just think Kansas was too new and too early.
Okay.
It was too much too soon, and there were tons of money spent to confuse the issue in the final moments, and it's probably what influenced it. Frankly, I see that happening in the gambling debate all the time. Lady?
If I could change subjects for a bit, it's not surprising that, given his record in the legislature, that this governor would have vetoed the school choice proposals that you had supported here, and the legislature itself shot down the more sweeping versions of a couple of those bills. Does this make that education having been, other than the transgender thing, maybe education has not been as hot a topic perhaps in the legislature in recent years because of that circumstance? Will it be a major issue in the 2023 governor's race in light of what we have seen, say, in Virginia?
Or Arizona. Atlanta's question is education, which was savings account, some of the school choice options which are debated don't seem to be such a major component under our current governor. What will it be going forward? And you cited Kansas and Arizona as examples. Virginia, I'm sorry. Two crazy states. Look, I want to think of the top 6 happiest places to live in America. My old grandma used to tell me, "Shut up, people up north, they're not bad, no, they just hungry." Her idea of north was anything north of Ville Platte. You got outside St. Landry Parish, she was in Yankee territory, but and I do believe breaking of bread can solve a lot of disputes where we discuss as gentlemen and ladies what's best for the future of our children and our children's children. We've been involved in educational choice from the beginning. We believe it's imperative. In fact, it's immoral. Bobby Jindal said this. It's immoral to sentence a kid by zip code to a certain school, whether that school serves that family or that child or not. And we get one shot at educating a child. Yeah, I do believe going forward, educational choice. The governor vetoed some of those measures. We worked aggressively on that and others. I think it goes larger. When we understand we got the team, we have the leadership, and we have the support of the fourth floor. Obviously, there's a power in the fourth floor. And I think going forward, you will see more educational choice matters.
I noticed one of the initiatives dealt with adoption. Representative Edmonds has sponsored a number of reform-related adoption measures over the last few years as a result of constituents coming to him and saying they had been defrauded during the adoption process. What are your thoughts about the current state of the adoption industry in Louisiana? Do you think that those efforts were fruitful and can be further enhanced to improve the...
So the question is, Representative Edmonds, pro-adoption measures, and do you think it was a good bill, and will we see adoption as an alternative going forward? Short answer to that is it better become a viable alternative, because right now we're looking at for years, decades now, we've told young women pregnancy is a disease that's treatable by any number of outcomes. And unfortunately, too many decided, well, termination of a clump of cells is not a big deal. But it was the law that taught us that was okay. Now the law is grappling with what does it mean for Louisiana? What does it mean for the United States? What does it mean for this particular young lady going forward? We think that Edmonds is correct, and we need to up our game. He also moved to fund some of the pregnancy care clinics at a very modest level so that they can provide some of the services that are necessary. I think we're going to have this dialogue going forward What then can the nonprofit sector do in the arena of unplanned or unexpected or crisis pregnancies for a population that has no safety net and has no other place to go? And the answer is going to be, well, we're going to have to go to them. And we're trying to do that. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask a question about gun violence, which is now the #1 killer of children. What is your position on this threat?
So the question is, gun violence being a #1 killer of children, what is our position on that? Obviously, New Orleans is named one of the deadliest cities in America with regard to the rising crime rate. My same son, who's in the Special Forces, was on Troop N in mounted patrol when all of that downtown kerfuffle was going on just a few months or years ago. And here in 2016, when the shots were fired right down the road from here. I believe the Second Amendment was there for a reason. I believe the reason Louisiana's Constitution says every able-bodied male, 17 and above, is a member of the unorganized militia. And it was because we knew that guns may be necessary one day to defend one's person or property. And the lawless who also use guns, and the law who's often used against the citizens who are honest brokers of the law, not the lawless. The big difference when you decide who the category or the audience is are not going to respond to that law. Most of the places where violence has been deemed extremely high and gun violence out of control have numerous laws on the book, none of which are honored. The lawless don't honor laws. And one day you or your loved one may need to defend their personal property. And I support that. I carry today, and I sat at the editorial board just a few years ago for the Morning Advocate. And I told the members of the Advocate the things that y'all said about me, this is 10, 15 years ago, which I don't believe are accurate, but I'm here to unpack anything you deem needs to be understood or unpacked better. I'm willing to do it. I said, because some of the things that are said are so inflammatory. I've picked up 5 nails in my driveway and in my office and in my children's vehicles. I got 2 new bullet holes in my building. And I carry today because I'm concerned about the well-being of my children. And to the credit, we came to terms that perhaps our conversation needs to be at a certain level, that we don't demagogue an issue or politicize it. We understand the best ideas of either side, and we try to carry that conversation going forward. I hope I answered your question. Yes, sir.
I hate to follow up with the little question, but again, look, upcoming in October is an event that you all have on Lafayette. Given what you say is the purposes, of your organization, is there anything within your mission that requires you to be in attendance at that event, which will feature those kind of people?
What event is that?
In October, a gentleman by the name of Jack Wasoviak,
Can you speak just a little
a
bit?
controversial alt-right conspiracy theorist, has been invited. And we don't know where that is going, but will your organization be comfortably distancing itself from appearances at such events in Louisiana?
That's like asking me if I'm gonna beat up my wife. I never have. Thank
Well,
you.
look, you didn't say your buddy, Clay Higgins. Okay. Those
No, I
were-
said your
And so I
congressman.
know that guys like that will be there, and I know many of the alt-right conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, I
People
don't
who
beat them up.
believe that our election was not a fair one. And will still never say that Donald Trump lost the election, will be there. And I'm asking, is there anything within the course and scope of your mission
Yeah, I
that
told
requires your attendance there, or will your group be comfortably distancing itself from appearances
I don't know
at
what you're
such
talking about.
events?
I've never been to one and I have no plans to. October is hunting season and it's moving season, and there'll be other things going on. I will be armed, but it'll be for a different purpose.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I think you had a question over here.
You know, there's what y'all are involved in most in big subjects right now, abortion and all the things that are coming up. But there's some things that borderline because they separate so many people that are conservative, even when it comes to the death penalty. Them up, a couple elections that people say, oh, no, man, this guy, there's no moral in it. Some of the people, the churches, then definitely
What's your
they're
question?
thinking about moral. The question is, we're gonna give them people a chance, all right, to repent sometime down the line. So if we kill them, it ain't gonna happen. Or the other thing, money-wise, is y'all spend so much money with the people in prison that we're wasting money and wasting time. The other thing is workers' rights. Where y'all come when it comes a time to think about work safety? We all want business here, but business taking advantage of it. The governor and
I
them
think I
fighting.
understand your question.
What about them questions? Where does that y'all think?
So on the question of judicial reform, we don't think any person is irredeemable. But ultimately, redemption doesn't mean getting out, it means getting right with the Lord. And we can do that right now at any moment. It takes a simple, I'm sorry, Lord. I accept your invitation to salvation. I believe you are the Son of God. You lived a sinless life, and you died for my sins, and I confess you as my Lord and Savior. By the way, a death penalty has a tendency to accelerate the necessity of that conversation. So I think our earlier founders thought that's not necessarily bad. And they got it biblically from Genesis, where it says, when one man sheds another man's blood, by another shall his blood be shed. And it's reiterated in Romans 13 when it says, and governments are ministers of God to punish evil and reward good. On the question of big government, big tech, look, I think anything big deserves the right to be questioned, examined, and put under a microscope. That can be big education, that can be big media, if it's still big. And that's true at a large level. That's true at a lot of levels. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think all men ought to be held accountable. I think that's the way our best likelihood of succeeding is through accountability. Jim's holding me accountable now, he's kicking me out.
Great job, Jim.